5,000 years ago, on a field called Kurukshetra, two massive armies stood face to face. But this wasn't just about kingdoms or power. What happened here would answer a question we all face. When life forces you to choose between what's right and what feels right, what do you do? On one side, the Pandavas. 5 brothers who had lost everything, been humiliated, cheated, and exiled. They stood here not for revenge, but because sometimes fighting for what's right is the only option left. Sometimes peace isn't an option when injustice refuses to stop. On the other side, the Kauravas. 99 brothers, convinced they were right. Bigger army, more resources, more power. But here's the thing about being on the wrong side. Most people on the wrong side don't know they're on the wrong side. They have their reasons, their justifications, their truth. And in the middle of all this stands Arjuna, the greatest archer alive, trained since childhood, undefeated in battle, the perfect warrior. But what nobody knew was that this perfect warrior was about to face something no training could prepare him for: his own heart. With Krishna, the divine guide, as his charioteer. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from the teacher, but from the crisis that forces us to seek it. Arjuna asked Krishna to take the chariot between both armies. He wanted to see who had come to fight. It seemed like a warrior's request, a strategic assessment. But sometimes we ask to see things, not because we're ready, but because we don't realize what seeing will do to us. Krishna didn't say much, just guided the chariot forward. Because sometimes the best teachers don't protect us from the lessons we need to learn. They let us see what we need to see, even when it breaks us. The chariot moved to the center, right between both armies. From here, Arjuna could see everything, both sides, all the faces. And here's the cruel truth about perspective. Sometimes seeing clearly is the hardest thing to bear. Arjuna looked at the warriors standing ready, thousands of soldiers, weapons gleaming, ready to kill or die. Up until this moment, this was simple. Enemy, fight, win. But what happens when the enemy stops being a concept and becomes a face you recognize? There stood Bhishma, the Grand Patriarch, the man who had raised both the Pandavas and Kauravas, taught them, protected them, loved them equally. And now he stood on the opposite side. Life does this sometimes. It puts the people who gave us everything on the opposite side of what we believe is right. What do you do then? And Dronacharya, his guru, the man who had taught Arjuna everything he knew about archery, about warfare, about discipline. Every skill Arjuna had, every achievement, every victory, it all came from this man. And Arjuna was expected to use those very skills to fight against the one who gave them. This is the paradox of growth. Sometimes the very wisdom we're given is meant to be used in ways that break our heart. Karna stood there too, Arjuna's greatest rival, yet also his brother. Unknown to most, they shared the same mother. Here was a man who had been rejected, humiliated, denied his rightful place, and yet had chosen loyalty over bitterness, fighting for someone who gave him respect when the world gave him none. Sometimes the people on the opposite side aren't villains. They're just wounded souls who found someone who made them feel worthy. Uncles, cousins, brothers-in-law, teachers, students. On both sides, family. This wasn't a war between strangers. This was a family tearing itself apart. And here's the brutal truth. Most of the hardest battles we fight aren't against enemies. They're against people we love, over principles we can't compromise. Arjuna's hands tightened on his bow, the Gandiva, his divine weapon. It felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. A choice, a commitment, an irreversible decision. Sometimes the heaviest things we carry aren't physical. They're the choices we know will change everything. And then it happened. That moment when everything you thought you knew starts to crack. Arjuna saw his kinsmen, all gathered, ready to fight each other. The realization began to sink in. Not intellectually, emotionally. In your gut, in your heart, in that place where truth hurts the most. Krishna watched. He knew what was happening inside Arjuna. The storm rising, the doubt creeping in, the crisis building. He didn't intervene. Because some transformations can only happen through crisis. Some wisdom can only be born from complete breakdown. One man, between two massive armies. Alone with an impossible choice. Duty on one side, heart on the other. And in that moment, Arjuna was every single person who has ever stood at a crossroad, where every option feels wrong, where doing what's right means destroying what you love. His body started to react before his mind could process. Hands trembling, mouth dry, the physical symptoms of a moral crisis. Because our bodies know the truth before our minds accept it. Your body knows when you're about to do something that violates who you are. His whole body trembled, hair standing on end. This wasn't fear of death. This was something deeper. Fear of becoming someone he couldn't recognize. Fear of crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. We all have that line. The question is, do we know where it is before we cross it? The Gandiva slipped from his hands, the weapon that had never failed him, that had won countless battles, that had made him a legend. Now it fell. Not because he was weak, but because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go of what made you strong, when using it would destroy who you are. Krishna watched silently. His face showed deep compassion, but he didn't speak. Not yet, because sometimes the most loving thing a teacher can do is let the student go through the pain. Let them feel it fully. Only then can real transformation begin. Arjuna looked at Bhishma and Dronacharya standing in the enemy ranks. How could he shoot arrows at them? They were more than teachers, they were father figures. They had shaped him, and now he was supposed to destroy them? This is the cruelty of righteous war. It asks you to hurt the people who loved you. He would rather be a beggar than kill these noble souls. And you know what? That's not weakness. That's humanity. The ability to value relationships over victory, love over duty, heart over strategy. But here's the question. Is there ever a time when that humanity becomes a trap? Memories flooded back. Happier times, when these same people smiled at him, encouraged him, celebrated his victories, when family was family, before it became sides in a war. Nostalgia is powerful, but it can also blind us to what must be done. His grandfather Bhishma's blessings echoed in his heart. The love, the pride, the hope in those blessings. And now that same grandfather stood ready to fight against him. Life's greatest pain isn't losing people. It's when the people are still there, but on the opposite side. He saw only sin in this, only wrong, only destruction, and maybe he was right. Maybe killing your own family is always wrong, no matter what the cause. Or maybe some wrongs must be done to prevent greater wrongs. That's the paradox he was trapped in. What good is victory if those you love are dead? What good is a kingdom if it's built on the graves of family? What good is life itself if you have to become a monster to keep it? These aren't academic questions. These are questions that haunt every person who has had to choose between love and principle. Krishna listened, patient, silent, knowing that Arjuna needed to say it all, feel it all, break completely. Because you can't rebuild someone until they're fully broken. You can't teach someone who thinks they already know. The breakdown had to be complete for the teaching to begin. Arjuna was confused about his duty. His being was overcome with weakness. He didn't know what was right anymore. And that's the moment when real learning becomes possible. When you stop pretending to know. When you admit you're lost. When you finally ask for help. Pride keeps us stupid. Humility opens the door to wisdom. He started listing them. Teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, uncles, nephews, cousins, friends. Every relationship that makes life worth living. All standing across from him, ready to die or kill. This wasn't a battle formation. This was a family reunion turned nightmare. All his people stood before him, not enemies, not strangers. His people. The word enemy loses all meaning when you know their childhood stories, when you've celebrated festivals together, when you've shared meals and memories, The warrior wept, and there's no shame in that. The strongest person in the room is often the one who allows themselves to feel the full weight of what they're about to do. Numbness is not strength. Feeling everything and still moving forward, that's strength. He didn't want to kill them, even if they killed him. Not for the sovereignty of three worlds, not for this earth, not for anything. And you know what? This level of love, this level of refusing violence, even in self-defense, this is divine. But is it practical? Can love alone solve everything? His mind was reeling, he couldn't think clearly. And that's okay. Clarity doesn't always come when we demand it. Sometimes we have to sit with confusion. Sometimes we have to surrender to not knowing. That's when real wisdom can enter. Krishna saw the depth of his friend's anguish. And he felt it too. Because real teachers don't stand above their students' pain. They stand in it with them. They witness it fully. Only then can they guide someone through it. What happiness could come from killing them? Only sin, only guilt, only regret that lasts lifetimes. And maybe he's right. Maybe some victories are too expensive. Maybe some battles shouldn't be fought. But then again, maybe some battles must be fought despite the cost. That's the impossible choice. Even if they are blinded by greed, even if they can't see the wrong in destroying family, why should we lose that wisdom? Why should we sink to their level? It's a valid argument, but here's the counter. When evil doesn't stop itself, when injustice continues unchecked, at what point does inaction become complicity? With the destruction of family, traditions die. With the loss of tradition, chaos takes over. He was seeing the domino effect of violence, how one action leads to another, until everything we value is destroyed. He was thinking generations ahead. But is preserving tradition worth preserving injustice? The weight of Dharma itself pressed down on him. Dharma, that word that means duty, righteousness, cosmic order, the right way to live. But what is Dharma when every choice feels wrong? What is right when right and wrong are tangled together like roots of an ancient tree? It would be better if they killed him, unarmed and unresisting. Just let it end without his participation, without his guilt. Passive martyrdom as the ultimate escape. But is that courage or avoidance? Is that principle or just the inability to make an impossible choice? With these words, overcome with grief, Arjuna set aside his bow and arrows. He sat down in the chariot. The warrior had collapsed. But in that collapse, in that complete surrender to confusion, in that admission of not knowing, something else became possible. The space for real wisdom to enter. Because you can't fill a cup that's already full. This is how the sage Sanjaya narrated it. Arjuna, overwhelmed with pity and despair, his eyes full of tears, spoke these words. And that description is important. Pity and despair. Not anger, not hatred, not vengeance. Pity and despair. The hardest battles are fought by the kindest hearts. Both armies waited, horns silent, weapons ready but not raised. The fate of kingdoms hung in balance, yes, but more than that, the fate of one man's soul. Because in the end, kingdoms rise and fall, but what you choose to become in moments like these, that lasts forever. And Krishna, witnessing all of this, the divine in human form, he had the power to stop it all, to change it all, to make it easier. But he didn't, because the greatest gifts come through the hardest struggles. And what he was about to teach Arjuna would change not just this war, but every human being who would ever face an impossible choice. Arjuna's final words, "I will not fight." A complete refusal. A total surrender. And in that moment, he was the most honest he had ever been. No false bravado, no pretense, just raw, honest human breakdown. And that honesty, that vulnerability, is what made him ready for what came next. Krishna's eyes held infinite depth. He saw not just this moment, but the entire destiny unfolding. He saw every person who would ever read these words, face these choices, feel this pain. He saw you. Yes, you, right now, facing your own impossible choice. And he knew that what he was about to say would guide you through it. The Gandiva lay silent, waiting. Not for battle, but for understanding, for clarity, for the moment when duty and heart could align. When doing what's right wouldn't mean destroying what you love. Or maybe, for the moment when you realize that sometimes it does mean that, and you do it anyway. And so, on that ancient battlefield, began the Bhagavad Gita. Not a religious text, but a conversation about life, about duty and love, about war and peace, about knowing yourself and your purpose. Born from the darkest moment of doubt, it became the brightest light of wisdom. Because that's how transformation works. Rock bottom becomes the foundation. Krishna began to speak, and his first words cut through everything. You speak wise words, Arjuna, but you grieve for those who should not be grieved for. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead. Because what he was about to teach wasn't just strategy or philosophy. It was the answer to the question every human being asks. How do I live when life becomes impossible?